Dear conference organizers and participants, sincere thanks and warmest greetings on this onomastic event. I'm Anna Tsepkova, and it's an honor for me to present results of my research on unconventional nominations aimed at American and Russian nicknames of persons motivated by a combination of linguistic and extra-linguistic factors. The object of research is unconventional nominations which circulate in American and Russian societies on the level of micro-society in informal discourses of daily communication. In this presentation, I aim to conduct a cross-cultural comparative analysis of formation patterns of American and Russian anthroponymic nicknames motivated by a mixture of linguistic and extra-linguistic factors. Nicknames for the American sample have been collected since 2006, first by means of paper or word format questionnaires, secondly by means of an anonymous online questionnaire survey, which was conducted within the Fulbright-funded project among students, professors, and staff of Eastern Washington University and University of Mississippi. And thirdly, the bank of nicknames was complemented by nicknames extracted by means of continuous sampling from internet forums representing different social spheres and groups. On these forums, American contributors share and discuss their real-life nicknames online in corresponding thematic threads, which you can see on this slide. Nicknames for the Russian sample have been collected since 2003 from school, college, and university students of Novosibirsk. As a result, our database includes 820 nicknames in the American sample and more than 3,000 nicknames in the Russian sample. The process of collecting nicknames in both ethnic communities is still continuing, but so far the number of nicknames from the American sample is significantly lower. Nevertheless, peculiar is the fact that in the category of nicknames based on mixed motivation, the proportion of these nicknames is significantly higher in the American sample than in the Russian one. As for theoretical framework of our research, which determines our research methodology, fundamental to our analysis are studies on motivational types of nicknames, semiotics of names, and language play and linguistic creativity. First of all, distributing nicknames into motivational types, we stick to the principles suggested by Nigel Barley, Joan Morgan, and developed by Kate Coyton. According to these scholars, nicknames fall into two basic motivational types: name-based nicknames and characterizing nicknames. Nicknames of persons, coined by means of mixing linguistic and extra-linguistic motives, form a unique group of hybrid unconventional anthroponyms, performing identifying and characterizing functions by means of combining a person's official name with lexemes, referring to qualities, attributes, situations associated with name bearers. Secondly, when analyzing the patterns within this category of nicknames, we take into account semiotic theory of Charles Peirce, developed in works by Professor Grant Smith, and in doctoral thesis by Amatosha Melefa. Nicknames in particular are interesting as signs as they manifest in dexical, iconic, and antithetical semiotic properties. Thirdly, when analyzing nicknames with complex motivation, as hybrid nominations manifesting a unique blend of indexical and iconic or antithetic references, we take into account research on language play and linguistic creativity, which is understood as the fundamental human capacity to create new linguistic units according to certain patterns, reflecting the unlimited creative potential of a language, its generativity. Nicknames of hybrid type can be treated as exponents of linguistic creativity performed by means of language play, which, according to David Crystal, occurs when people manipulate the forms and functions of language as a source of fun for themselves and or for the people they are with. Analyzing the coinage patterns, we distinguish between indiscrete or discrete nicknames, nicknames which are used as indices or signs of hybrid nature, direct nominations or indirect nominations, and nominations which retrieve true etymology of a name or reinvent it by means of certain language play devices. Hybrid nicknames are indiscrete and concise nominations, usually single word nominations, which are based on one or several components of a person's name. A person's name in this case is transformed in such a way that it turns into a speaking name, denoting and or connoting something about its bearer, corresponding to or contradicting the bearer's identity. Now we are going to comment on the main mechanisms which are used to create such indiscrete, concise nominations. So first of all, when creating indiscrete nicknames of hybrid nature, the first model that can be named here is substitution. Substitution of a name by an appellative or a famous name which sounds similar by means of false etymology. So this mechanism is based on paranomasia, and in this case, also the nickname is used as a metaphor. Thus, this kind of pattern has iconic nature, both on phonetic and semantic level. For example, the nickname based on the last name Paradovsky sounds like paradox, which is a subjective association of the name giver. And at the same time, it is connected with the name bearer metaphorically, particularly with the quality of the name bearer's behavior as a non-standard person. In the American sample, the same with, for example, the nickname Skate, which is a paranomasia and a metaphor at the same time, based on the last name, on the first name Scott, which is metaphorically connected with behavior of the person named. The next subcategory here within nicknames which are coined by means of substitution. The pattern combining paranomasia or metonymy or description, thus demonstrating iconic and indexical patterns. This pattern refers to the name bearer's quality by means of direct reference. Then within the same category, we can observe the model of connected with decomposing a name, and at the same time, it is based on metaphorical reference to the situation or qualities of the name bearer. These two nicknames are found in the American sample. In the Russian sample, such nicknames have not been found. The second big pattern is substituting a last name by an appellative, reviving its true etymology, unlike the previous one, where etymology was misinterpreted. So reviving true etymology can be done by means of retrieving the etymon, and this etymon directly refers to the quality of the person named, thus following the indexical pattern, like Reзвy or Frisky comes from the last name Rizvanov, and at the same time names or characterizes the person's behavior. Retrieval of the etymon can also be accompanied by the metaphorical pattern when the etymon itself refers to the qualities of the person metaphorically, like Goose from last name Goosev, or Pushka, which means cannon, from the last name Pushkin, metaphorically refers to the situation when a person was constantly sneezing and coughing, spreading germs on children around him. In the American sample, we found only one example, blood from Trueblood, associated with a person's cold-blooded temper. Then within this second pattern, we also observed the mechanism of retrieving etymology by means of substituting the etymon with the hypernym. And this hypernym also is a metaphor. It names the quality, it refers to the qualities of a person metaphorically, like birdie is a hypernym to the etymon Zhavornak, which is the basis for the person's last name Zhavornikov. Such nicknames are found only in the Russian sample, where they are still very rare. Now, the third pattern is blending a name with an appellative. In this case, again, blending is accompanied by a metaphorical pattern, iconic pattern, like Algushonak is based on the first name of the person, Olga, combining the qualities associated with Lyagushka, which is a frog in Russian, because of cold limbs. Or encyclopedia, in this case, Pete becomes part of blend, encyclopedia, connoting, well, the person's intellectual abilities. Then within the mechanism of blending, we can point out blending accompanied by metonymy, which demonstrates an indexical pattern. Examples are found in the American sample in this case. Crisco, from Crisco, Ludacris. My name is Lucas and I have a lisp, so I got Ludacris. Boriska, so this is a blend of Boris and Tris, which is rice in Russian. Pattern number 4, onomastic blends, combines indexical and iconic patterns in the following way. For example, nickname Mr. N represents a reference to Mr. X, Imre Kalman's operetta character, famous for being secretive and mysterious. And the nickname is coined according to this pattern by substituting X by the initial letter of a person's name, and the nickname which results from this transformation is at the same time a metaphorical reference to a person's secretive and serious demeanor. In the American sample, let's take Idalia the Tan, which is the play on the name of a famous person, Attila the Hun. So Idalia is associated with the name Attila, and then the Han is substituted with the Tan with reference to the person's appearance. Pattern number 5, inevitable associations with a famous name, a person, or a character who is the nominee's namesake. For example, in the Russian database, the nickname Masha, which is based on a metaphorical reference to Masha's namesake, Masyanya, who is a character from the Russian animated series. So the metaphorical connection is that of resemblance, physical appearance. Then an example of bus, which comes from the last name Shalyapin, and Shalyapin being a famous Russian operatic boss of the past. So in this case, bus is a metonymic reference to the person's famous namesake. In the American sample, we have an example Marco Polo from Mark, inevitable association, based not only on the name, but also on the person's adventurous character. Pattern number 6, meaningful abbreviations of first, middle, patronymic, and last names. Some of them are based on metonymic relations between the person and the proper name, like Om from the initials of the teacher of physics, or M and M, because I love M&Ms, and M is the first letter in my first and last name. Or meaningful abbreviations can be based on metaphor, like TV in the Russian sample from the teacher's initials, and hairstyle associated with hair sticking up like a TV antenna. Pattern number 7, ironic interpretation of last name etymology. And in this case, last name is usually transparent. We find the 2 examples of this pattern in the Russian sample, like Velichka from Veliki, great, but the person is actually short, or Volkaban from the person's last name, but the person is very thin. Such examples are not found in the American sample so far. Pattern number 8, connotative name transforms. Examples are found in the Russian sample. First of all, the example with Astapok from last name Astapov, a diminutive suffix added to a clip last name iconically connotes humiliation, underestimation of a person's mental abilities, who is characterized as a thick head. And the second case here is substituting a name by a similar sounding but more exotic name. For example, Clara from the first name Larissa. Exotic connotation iconically corresponds to the name bearer's eccentric and extraordinary behavior. Pattern number 9, gender transforms. According to this pattern, female names are turned into male nicknames, and male names are turned into female nicknames, connoting certain cross-gender correlations, similarities, or connections, like Sanich from the female name Oksana, referring to the person's relations with boys, or Gala from last name Galinov, refers to the person's feminine looks, Jess as the male version of the name, refers to the situation connected with the parents' wish to have a male child, or Todetta, a female version of the name Todd, which refers to the situation connected with the play with the Snapchat filter. The second group of hybrid nicknames is multi-word nicknames. These are discrete nominations in which indexical and characterizing functions are distributed according to the nature of each component. The onymic component, a personal name derivative or transform, acts as an index, performing an identifying function. The appellative component, performing a characterizing function, may act as an index or as an icon. Being discrete, these nominations demonstrate different degrees of interdependence. Examples on the slide demonstrate cases when each component independently performs its corresponding function and both components are indexical. However, in some cases, interdependence between two components is highlighted on different levels. For example, on collocational level, as in the examples on the slide, Crackling Rosie or Dr. Seuss. In these examples, though each of the components performs its corresponding indexical function, together they allude to a certain cultural artifact. Some other ways to establish a connection between the two components of a discrete nickname is phonetic similarity. So, for example, by means of rhyme, like in the examples Mitroshka Kartoshka, Nastya Pasta, Raquel Ankle Swell, or Jack Slack, or Svetka Krevetka. This is the reference based on the metaphorical similarity between the two objects. Then another way of connecting the two elements of a discrete nomination is phonetic repetition, especially alliteration, and such examples are found in the American sample. Richie, Rich, Lying, Lions, Rowdy, Riley, Psycho, Syak. Coming to the conclusion, I would like to start with some quantitative peculiarities across the two samples. First of all, even though the number of nicknames collected for both samples is unequal, with fewer nicknames in the American sample, the ratio of hybrid nicknames in the American sample is higher than in the Russian one. Secondly, in both samples, indiscrete hybrid nicknames prevail over multi-word discrete nicknames. However, in the US sample, the difference is statistically insignificant, whereas in the Russian sample, single-word nicknames significantly prevail over multi-word ones. At this stage of our research, we can suggest that these differences can be connected with structural peculiarities of languages, as the vocabulary of the Russian language is polysyllabic. The multi-word patterns lead to extension of a nomination, which conflicts with the rules of conciseness. Thirdly, the majority of discrete nicknames are triggered by associations with given names in both samples. However, in the group of indiscrete nicknames, the proportions are reversed. In the American sample, given names are springboards for hybrid nicknames, whereas in the Russian sample, last names prevail. Such results support our previous observations on name-based non-characteristic nicknames, which show the same tendency. As for similarities, the following patterns are universally found across both ethno-linguistic communities. Substitution of the name by a similar sounding meaningful lexeme, the case of false etymology. Blending inevitable associations with a famous name, gender transforms, meaningful abbreviations, and rhymes. As for patterns which differ and are not found in one of the samples, so they are the following. In the Russian sample, reviving etymology of last names and ironic interpretations of last names etymology are found, whereas in the American sample, a unique one is alliterated multi-word nicknames. It should be highlighted that gaps in formation patterns pointed out in the course of analysis are viewed as potential slots, which can be filled out in the process of further expansion of databases. To sum up, the group of hybrid nicknames demonstrates the most sophisticated and creative patterns, with the help of which the nominator manages to produce a novel nomination, which is laconic, indiscrete, informative, and witty. This happens when a nickname can simultaneously perform indexical function of identification, cognitive function of characterization, pragmatic function of evaluation or attitude, as regards both the nominee and the nominator, and metalinguistic function of language play. If small in number, the group of hybrid nicknames must be appreciated as the most diverse in terms of coinage patterns, aimed at catching and carrying multifaceted audiovisual and emotional experiences of human interaction. On this slide, you can see the references and internet resources. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be happy to hear your questions or comments.
Hi, thank you very much, Professor Anna Tsepkova.
Thank you very much. I'm thinking of a famous nickname in English that is ironic, tiny, Little John in Robin Hood. And as an American, the stereotype that I have of Southern nicknames is that they may often have that kind of, like the giant guy's nickname is Tiny. So you might ask the people in Mississippi if they can locate some. Thank you.
Yes, irony happens, but well, the quantitative analysis shows that it's not that frequent, though.
I have a question. You mentioned in your presentation that in the Russian sample, there were more nicknames based on surnames or family names. Do Russian students call each other by their surnames? Because I remember when I was in school, I didn't ever even know anyone's last name.
Thank you very much for your question. Well, this is the result that I got analyzing name-based nicknames in general, and this particular group of mixed nicknames shows the same tendency. And I was thinking why it is so. And well, I see several factors in that. Well, actually at schools, at least as far as I remember, it was a long time ago, but anyway, in schools, teachers may often call students by their last names. Well, and that's why last names are quite, well, school students know each other's last names, and so they are in circulation. That's why they can be the basis of nicknames. And secondly, first names are, I would say, not as varied, well, as, for example, American first names, given names. Well, I was comparing the dictionaries of first names in, well, in the United States and in Russia, and, well, Russian dictionaries give like from 4,000 to 5,000 first names, and in the American sample it is like 10 times more, if I'm not mistaken, but definitely it's much more. And so the scope of first names is comparatively unvaried, though there are a lot of new and novel names in use nowadays, but still. So that can be one of the reasons as well. I see there are some questions in the chat. Yeah. Alliteration is an important part of the poetic of English, so it makes sense to me that it would show up in the nicknames. Is alliteration important in Russian poetics? I think yes, only you see, of course, alliteration can be found in the scope of, for example, first name and last name based nicknames, especially those which are not characteristic, which are not hybrid. Because for this talk, I discussed those which combine both names and well, characteristics of the person. But of course, there is much more to it, and there's a big group of nicknames which are based on names on given names, on last names, and they are not characteristic, but there is a lot of language play there, and there are alliterations there, only they were not found well in this small group of nicknames in the Russian sample, I mean. But yes, it is popular, yeah.
Question: this Russian name database you used was from Novosibirsk, right?
Right, yeah, mostly.
Question: do you think you would have found something significantly different in another area of Russia?
Well, Novosibirsk the subjects which were asked these questions in Novosibirsk are usually university students, and these university students not necessarily come from Novosibirsk. So some of them come from different other areas, usually Siberian areas. Well, it's like the Asian parts of Russia. So there is a bit of variety here. And also I am comparing research which is done by my colleagues on the basis of their local nicknaming practices. And well, I don't know about the percentage. I can't say it definitely now. I should know that better, but in general, the key patterns are more or less the same. And they say that, for example, the biggest group is characterizing nicknames. The second biggest group is nicknames based on names. Well, and then there are some minor groups. And the same is in the American sample. And when I compare these two samples, which are so different, American and Russian, and when I see such tendencies, even though the difference in proportion and in the scope in the databases is significant, still this shows some kind of a tendency, like a universal one, even though it's just Novosibirsk. But yes, I hope to extend it to other places and other regions and do some collaboration with colleagues from the European part.
I think the first question from the chat room, okay? Most of these names seem to have been given as adults, are some given as children and stay with the person even as adult?
Well, I need to clarify that the nicknames which have been collected were reported by students. And when the students reported these nicknames, they commented, I mean, university students, well, they still highlighted the fact that these nicknames were were in circulation in their school days. Well, they have to give this information when the nickname was in circulation in their questionnaires. So from which I get to know that though I was mostly interviewing students and, well, in general, subjects who are of age, who are over 18, still the nicknames that they were reporting come from their childhood, their school days. And some you stay with the person even as an adult. Well, yes, this can happen. But of course, there's a lot of evidence that they are very discourse specific, like family and, school and other spheres. And there's a comment.
Yes, a comment. The phenomenon of not even knowing the surnames of one's fellow students would be fairly new in American culture. This is from Cleveland Kent Evans. He said that he is 72 and certainly heard the surnames of my fellow classmates often in my childhood, and knew people whose nicknames were based on surnames instead of given names.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Evans. The question from Zazara, Professor.
Yeah,
okay.
Jazira. I have a question. In the Kazakh language, such nicknames are very developed. Are their names related to sexual characteristics? For example, boys who likes girl are girls, or girls who look like boys are called boys, like that.
There are such nicknames. They are not numerous, but yes, there are such nicknames, and I showed a couple of nicknames, well, which are part of this group of hybrid nicknames, and there are also such nicknames in characterizing. Well, in the group of characterizing nicknames, they are not like numerous, but yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Anna.